we start part B of Module 2, Java Servlet Basic Features. B.1, Servlet Lifecycle. All right. First, we want to understand the basic procedure for a servlet to do the work from beginning to end. So the life cycle from beginning to end. Okay, yeah. A servlet's life cycle can be defined as entire process from its creation till the destruction. Yeah. First, let me explain this creation and destruction. Creation, when a web application containing this servlet gets started, in the server, so all the resources, files loaded into the JVM, all right? So, everything ready. So then the servlet gets started. So later we will learn the details, more and more for that step. All right, so now then, do the services, based on its design, request response, do all the normal work. All right, then destruction. At what time a servlet is destructed? When we want to stop that web application. Okay? If the web application keeps running, so then that particular servlet always, can do the work. Always. But at the end, eventually, because we want to update that web application, so we want to stop it. So then we, update the code, new code, then we deploy and restart it, right? In that situation, you have to stop the whole web application. At that time, that servlet must be destroyed first, right? So at that time, destruction. So that's the whole thing from beginning to end. That's the life cycle. All right. Then a little more detail. Servlet is initialized. There is an initialization step when the servlet just gets started. At the beginning time, there is a special step, initialization step. So inside this servlet, this method will be called in that initialization step. And in this one, we as programmers, we can do some preparation work at this point. So in our servlet, this method will be exposed. So we can write a code inside it. So that is this method. Later, our next topic, we will learn more details of this method. All right. Next one, the servlet calls the service method. So this is the main method. This method is, the doing the main work for this servlet, the service method. But this method is not exposed to us, Java programmers. We never see this method in our servlet class. Okay, so that's why many Java programmers, they do not know about this method. But it exists in a hidden way. Okay, the server knows it. The servlet container knows it and will call it to do the work. But what we see only the result of this method. This method will call some other methods, those methods to do big data processing. Then we work with those data processing methods, but not this one directly. Okay? So programmers never see this main method of a servlet. Yeah. But in order to understand a servlet lifecycle better, we need to know this method. A lot of steps, a lot of hidden work. If we want to understand better, we need to use this method. Okay, all right. Yeah. So later we will see how to use this method to process client's request. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Next, destroy method. Yeah. So eventually it will be destroyed, right? Yeah. Even some web application can run very long, okay, years. Yeah. But due to some reason, it will be eventually destroyed. And a lot of things should be done. Yeah. So in this destroy method, okay. So release memory resource, yeah, some regular things, yeah, you need to do. All right, okay. Finally, servlet is garbage collected by the garbage collector of JVM. So that's the, normal Java way to handle the memory resource. All right, so here give you a general discussion about the servlet lifecycle, but we need to understand each step with more details. Yeah. Next, let's look at the init method. All right. So when this method is called, yeah, so we start from there. Okay. Yeah. When a web container first starts a servlet, okay, yeah. Servlet, okay, all right, the whole web application is deployed in a server and start running, okay. So all the servlets and other Java classes, library files, everything is loaded into the JVM, okay, yeah, all right. Then to start each servlet, okay, one by one, okay, yeah. So for one servlet, when it is its turn to be started, yeah. So now its init method is called. Okay, yeah. This is called. If there is something special to do for this servlet, preparing some, parameters, database connection, several things. So now you have a chance to do it there, when it is called. Okay. All right, yeah. Init is called after the servlet is constructor, yeah, it's a regular Java class. So there is a constructor after the servlet is constructed, but before it can respond to the first request. Okay? Yeah. So here you can see the order. So we need to do the initialization before the servlet can provide any service to a client. Okay, yeah. All right, okay. And usually, yeah, so here, another thing, yeah, before I talk about this database thing. So here, another important thing I need to mention here is this is the only time it is called. Okay? So you only have one chance to call this method. Okay? So here it is the only time it is called. Okay? Yeah. in its whole life cycle, you have only one chance to call it. So why I emphasize this? Because this property is important to help us understand later when we talk about database connection. This property is very important. Okay? So you only have one chance to call this method. If you do something there, you do not have a second chance. Okay? Yeah. So that's why here I want to mention, only called once in its whole life cycle. Okay? Yeah. Remember this property. All right. Then we can talk about database connection. So you may use this method to read a property file. Yeah, so that is one thing you can do. Read the property files. Yeah. Some special properties people may like to store somewhere, right? Yeah. Later we will talk about. We can use the web.xml, our configuration file, to store some properties, parameters, settings, that kind of thing. And here in this method, we can read it, we can process that part. Okay? Yeah. All right. All right. Or another thing you can do, connect to a database using JDBC. Database, you need to make connection first. Okay? Database connection. Yeah. All right. You can do it. Now, here, let me say a few more sentences about this. Yeah, because here, this part is very important. Yeah. Because right now, it is the first time we look at this database connection problem. The first time. Yeah. Later, we will look at this problem many, many, many times. Yeah. So the first time we cannot talk too much about it. Yeah. So you can do it, right? You can do it, but it does not mean this is a good way to do it. This may not be a good way to do it. This could be a bad way to do it. Yeah. So later we will learn how many different ways we can connect databases and which way is good, which way is not good. Yeah. So we will look at that. That is a very important issue. Yeah. Here, this is the first time we look at a database connection. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Keep the database connection object open or closed. Yeah. Here. All right. Here, because it is still quite early to talk about database connection, but here I raise some question for you. Okay? I raise some question for you. After you use the database connection object, here I mentioned first, there is a database connection object needs to be created. Okay? Yeah. So when you do the database queries, you need to use some database connection object. Okay? Yeah. The question is, how do you manage this object? Here, we talk about how to manage this object. Do you always keep it open? Right? Yeah, so here I ask you that question. Do you always keep it open? Or another option is when you do not use it, you can close it. Database connection, we can close it. After you close it, you release the memory resource, right? Yeah. Because that object occupies memory resource. Okay? Now, if you want to release the memory resource occupied by some objects, you need to close the objects. When you do that, now we need to go back the second time. You only have one chance to open the database connection if you do it in this init method. If you close it, you won't have the second chance to open it, right? Think about that. Yeah. So that kind of thing, a little complicated. Yeah. So this time, when I talk about that, it could be a little early. Yeah. But later, I will talk about this problem another time. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Next, let's look at the service method, the most important method in a servlet. Yeah. All right. Service method services all incoming requests. Yeah. Every time when a request is sent to a servlet, so this method is called to do the service work. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what kind of service work? So let's try to look at that detail. It must parse. So first thing, parse. Why parse? Yeah. Because HTTP. Yeah. So here we need to use our HTTP background. HTTP background. Do you need to parse the HTTP request data? 3 components, you need to do that. Okay, so that's why there is this parse thing to do. Okay, yeah. We do not need to do that. Yeah, the server does it. Yeah, but we need to know what happened behind the scene. Yeah, so it must parse and handle the data on the incoming request. Yeah, so that's what we mean, the HTTP request incoming. So here, we talk about that. Okay? HTTP protocol. Based on the protocol, all right, so HTTP protocol. And then return, yeah, after the processing, business logic, all those things completed, right? Return a protocol acceptable response. Still HTTP response. Okay? HTTP response to the client. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. In our last video, the part A, the last one in part A, we talk about the translation, right? The dirty work. Yeah. Here, you need to use that. The dirty work response, protocol acceptable to then server needs to do the translation. Okay? Yeah. Server does it, the translation. Yeah. All right. In the HBTAR protocol, the service method should understand. Yeah, the service method will go through the whole HTTP request data. Okay, yeah. Understand the headers, extract information, the data from the header part. Okay, and the parameters, another part of parameters. Yeah. So this is our main data part. Okay. Although we may have some pieces of data in the header part, but the main data part is at this parameters, this portion. Yeah. Later, our next slide, we will talk about, not our next slide, our next video, we will talk about more detailed information about parameters. Yeah. We need to understand better on parameters. Yeah. And then return a proper HTTP response that includes the minimum HTTP headers. Yeah. All right. Content type, right? Yeah. So we learned that before. You need to specify the content type. Yeah. The minimum requirement. So then you may want to return some business data to the client, right? Yeah. So whatever you want to include it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. So that's the basic things. Yeah. But more. Yeah. So let's look a little more details for the service method. Yeah. All right. Main method perform actual task. Yeah. So what kind of thing? It usually do. Yeah, let's look at that. So each time the server receives a request from a servlet, the server spawns a new thread. Yeah, here, look at the phrase here. The server spawns a new thread. Yeah. So what's that? Yeah. Actually, we will learn something more in our next slide. But here, in order to understand the sentence here, I need to give you some explanation here at this point. Yeah. All right. First, let's go back to instance. Instance. Remember, when we use a servlet inside a web application, we need to create an instance, right? Instance in our web.xml. Remember the last time we talked about that, web.xml. When you create a servlet element, so you put some information there, then the server will use that information to create an instance of the server. Yeah. This instance corresponds to a process. A process. Okay? A running process. Okay? A process, the servlet running. Okay? A process. All right. Now with this process, now when you have a request, this process will generate a thread. One thread. Okay. So here we use multi-threading. Okay. So here, the servlet uses multi-threading technique. Multi-threading. Okay. But you cannot see it. So nobody can see it in a hidden way. Okay. Multi-threading. So that's why the servlet process spawns a thread. Okay. Yeah. So that thread, that particular thread, provides service for one user, one client, one user. Okay. Yeah. And it calls this service method, because this service method only does the service work for one client. Okay. So this service method checks HTTP request type. Yeah. Request, you need to specify which method to use, right? Get method, post method, which method to use. Okay. These possible methods you can use. So then that service method call a corresponding method. If it's a get method, it calls doGet method inside the servlet. The servlet has a doGet method. Okay? Or if it's a post method, it will call its doPost method. Okay? And so on. Okay? We as the programmers, we need to write a data processing code inside the doGet method or doPost method. Okay? That's our job. Okay? And in other words, when we develop a servlet, after we do some setup things, right? URL mapping, that kind of thing, configuration, and init method to, do some preparation on the parameters. Other than those things, then our main data processing work related to the business, related to our business, we need to use doGet or doPost for the detailed work. Yeah. That's the whole picture. Yeah. So at this point, you see the whole picture. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Because a lot of things hidden. So that's why for this video, I want to explain a lot of hidden things. So nobody can see directly, yeah. But we need that kind of details to understand the whole working procedure of a servlet. All right, so next slide. Now we want to look at the multi-threading details. All right, multi-process versus multi-threading. All right. The first thing is why here you can see no matter multi-process or multi-threading, you see this multi. Why this multi? The answer is very easy. Because your web application, you need to provide services for multiple users. Multiple users, right? Concurrently. Look at this. Concurrently. Okay? Concurrently. At the same time. Okay? Many users, they request the services. If there are a large number of users, so many of them, they need services at the same time. So your servlet should have the capability to provide the services concurrently. Yeah. So that's why we need a multi something. But here there is two ways to do the multitask, not multitasking, multi-services, right? Multi-services. Yeah. One way is the multi-process way. Another is multi-threading way. Why here I mentioned that multi-process way? Because some old programming language use multi-process way. Old, here I'm talking about old PHP. Old PHP, server-side scripting language. Old PHP uses multi-process way to do the services to multiple users concurrently. Yeah, so that here, that I compared these two ideas. Definitely, the old way is not efficient. Yeah. So the current PHP improved using multi-threading way. Okay? Just the same way of the servlet way. Servlet from the very beginning, late 90s, at that time, it used multi-threading way to do the services. All right, but here, so let me explain a little more on these two ways. First, what's the process? If you have the Unix background, in Unix, you learn process concept, right? So in Unix, the process means a running program is a process. When a program is running, okay, inside the main memory, a process must be created, okay, using allocated memory resource. So then, to do a lot of data processing work. So that is a process. Okay? Yeah. So each process needs resource for overhead part. Yeah. So preparation, when you need to do a lot of things, so you need to have the capability to do that. So inside the main memory, some memory resource should be allocated so that later, when this process needs to do some specific data processing work, it is ready to do it. So that's the overhead part. Okay? Yeah, overhead part use significant resource. We cannot ignore that part. Yeah. So here, we see that first. All right. Two processes do not share resource. Now, two different processes. Right? Even the same program can generate different processes, right? One program, yeah. So think about in Unix, one same program, you can create multiple different processes. Right? Even that, okay? But those two different processes, they cannot share any resource. So that means if you have two processes, the overhead part, the process one has its own overhead part. Okay? Overhead part. The process 2 has its own overhead part. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Yeah. So you can see they are completely independent. They do not share. Okay? Yeah. In that way, you can see if people use the multi-process way, you can see the overhead part repeated many, many times. So if you look at the total resource consumed, a lot of resource wasted in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why it is not good. All right. Then we move to a better way, thread way. Using thread, multi-threading, things are different. Yeah. A process can generate multiple threads. One process generates. So that's why we use that spawn, right? The word, previous slide, spawn, a new thread. So from one process, it can spawn many threads, right? Yeah. Threads generated by a process share a lot of resource. So that's the way a thread can save resource. First, a thread does not need the whole resource for a process. The thread, only keeps the minimum resource it needs to do the work. Okay? And thread can share resource with the parent process. Multiple threads can share the same resource of their parent process. So a lot of resource can be, especially the overhead part, can be saved a lot. All right? Yeah, so that's the reason multi-threading can save a lot of resource much faster. Okay? The overall performance comparing with multi-process much faster. Yeah. All right. Yeah. But when you see share, right? Here, this word, when you see this share, then there is a security issue, right? Yeah. The user's data, you need to protect the user's data, because one thread corresponds to one user. Another thread corresponds to another user, right? Yeah. If different users, you need to protect your user's data. You do not allow any user data is shared by other people, right? Other users. Yeah. So that's why thread, there is a security issue related to using threads safely, yeah, in a safe way. Yeah. All right. But that issue is an important one. But in this class, we do not talk about that. We are aware of it. We are aware of it. There is such issue. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but we do not talk about the details of that. Okay. All right. The conclusion. So at the end, what's the conclusion of this? Yeah. Multi-threading approach is more efficient than multi-process approach. That's the conclusion. Yeah. So then that's why the modern server-side programming language use multi-threading approach. Yeah. All right, so that's it. So that's our B.1, part B.1.